Hello, everybody. My name is Will, and I'm one of the project coordinators on the 10X team. I really just like to kick off today's session by thanking you all for your interest in our program and for showing up to learn about some of the work that 10X funds. I'll start off with just a very brief introduction to our program. I think, as some of you know, 10X is an incremental investment program that lives right here inside the General Services Administration. And when I say incremental investment program, I'm referring to our phased investment approach. So the basic idea is that when we start off a project in phase one, it has a small budget and limited resources. And if the project moves into phases 2, 3, or even 4, we allocate more resources and more funding to the project. So the idea is that the projects sort of have to prove themselves worthy of further investment as they move along. And so you'll hear some of our presenters are going to be discussing what happened in the various prior phases of their projects, and that's what they're referring to. So what does 10X invest in? We invest in new, good for government products and services. And the way that our program receives these ideas is by soliciting them from folks just like you. And if there's one thing I hope that all of our attendees take away from today's session, it's this. If you are a federal employee, you can submit an idea on a problem you'd like to solve to 10X. You'll notice that the presentations today include the original pitch language that started the projects. And I do want to point out that our program team has iterated on what we want out of a submission over the last few years, and we've provided a nice template that you can find on our submission form on our website, 10x.gsa.gov. It's a very nice little fill-in-the-blank exercise that's really designed to help you get some ideas out of your head and sort of onto paper or onto the page. So please check out our website. Like I said, every federal employee is eligible to submit an idea on a problem that you want to solve. This is a great time to do so. The submission period for our next round of funding actually closes this Thursday night. So please submit your idea before 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time on Thursday. But hey, if you missed the deadline, submit your idea anyways, because we'll be doing another round of evaluations later on in the year, and your idea can be considered then. So if you would like a more detailed overview of the 10X program, we're going to drop a link into the chat here. That's another overview video we've done before. So feel free to check that out and contact us, 10x.gsa.gov or 10x@gsa.gov. And with all that said, I really do want to move the emphasis today onto our project teams and the really exciting work that they're doing and that we are very proud of. So with that, I'm going to start off our first 5-minute lightning talk with Julia Lynn Paitner from 10X's Data Federation program. Take it away, Julia.
Thank you, Will. I'm very glad to be able to share our work with you. We can move to the next slide. This is the original pitch, and rather than reading this to you, I'll just summarize that the US Data Federation 10X project was really motivated by having recognized a common challenge that all across government policies, initiatives, and services all depend on the ability to collect and combine and exchange data from disparate sources, what we call federated data efforts. However, what we don't have are common solutions for that. So there was a recognition that there was a lack of infrastructural support or systemic investigation of this work. And so the goal of the US Data Federation project was to start looking at how to make managing federated data efforts easier by developing reusable tools and documenting and sharing repeatable processes. Next slide. So during phase one of the project, team members conducted some subject matter expert interviews with folks involved in federated data efforts, which resulted in a data federation maturity model and playbook available on our GitHub repository. In phase two, the team moved into prototyping an initial proof of concept for such a reusable tool that would do data aggregation validation. And thanks to another 10X project that you'll hear from in a moment, we were introduced to the US Department of Agriculture's Food and Nutrition Service, who presented a really compelling use case for such a tool. They actually helped the team pitch for phase three, which is the phase in which I joined the project. And we had several work streams for phase three. One was to develop what we ultimately called REVAL, a reusable validation and aggregation library, in partnership with the Food and Nutrition Service, but also find additional use cases to prove out the fact that it would actually be reusable. In addition, we were still talking to other folks to find out what other kind of repeatable processes or reusable tools might be worth sharing. And finally, where those things actually could be shared, and so that they would be ultimately widely adopted and found. Next slide. So the work, at the end of phase three, we found that we still needed some funding to continue to work on reval, but also this question of where reval and other tools like it would live was really at the top of our mind. And what we found was that we were, surprise, surprise, not the only ones thinking about data and data in government. And indeed, our idea about finding some way to have a repository for these types of tools, a way of sharing these online, was echoed in the Foundation for Evidence-Based Policymaking Act and by the Federal Data Strategy, both of which talked about resources.data.gov, creating and indeed mandating a platform that would be dedicated to sharing data standards, use cases, tools, resources. And so what you see at the top of this page here is our language for our phase 4 pitch was to get some funding to complete reval, but also use the work that we had already been doing to support those who were named in the legislation, which include the Office of Management and Budget, the Office of Government Information Services, and folks here at GSA, to really support a long-term vision and strategic plan for user-centered, maximally effective resources.data.gov. So far in this phase, which kicked off in October with a small team of myself and Mike Gintz, we got in touch with these stakeholders at other agencies and started to do some user research, talking to folks who are involved in data management and governance across multiple agencies. We talked to about 30 folks from across 14 agencies. And in so doing, defined a vision for what the US Data Federation could provide even post 10X, which would be a team that could be the content strategy engine for resources.data.gov, that would network and scavenge for resources across agencies that had perhaps created these for internal use, but also work with existing cross-agency efforts like the Federal Data Strategy to think about how to provide these resources and tools in the most effective manner, to not just meet the legal mandate for such a repository, but to truly make it a valuable and sustainable endeavor. So what we have next up is to prototype this vision for the Continued Data Federation team. So we've added some folks to our team, content strategist Princessa Jaku and engineer James Tranovich. We're also rejoined by an engineer from phase 3, Amy Mock. And so we're going to be developing and testing what we think would be the content strategy for the repository. That includes where we get these, where we get this content from, how we think about how it's displayed on the repository, content modeling, information architecture, as well as bringing reval to a stable place and using that as an example of how open source software might be made available through this repository. Next slide. We are very happy to hear from you. If you have ideas about this or are working on parallel efforts, as many people may be, you can reach out to our team at this team address or to me at Julia Lynn-Paitner at gsa.gov. We also have 2 GitHub repositories relevant here, one for the project as a whole, the other for our reusable tool, and 2 websites, the first of which was for the US Data Federation, which is no longer really being updated, but the resources.data.gov is really where we're putting all of our effort and what we hope will be a really great repository going forward. Thanks.
Cool. Thank you so much, Julia. If anyone has questions for her about the Data Federation project, feel free to drop them in our chat and we will get to them at the end of our session today. And next up, we have Mike Gintz on the Eligibility APIs initiative. Mike.
Hey, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Great, wonderful. Okay, looks like I'm number 2 Mike Gintz, according to my Zoom login name today. Number 1 couldn't make it, but I'm happy to be here. I'm here speaking about the Eligibility APIs initiative. It's another phase 4 initiative under the 10X program. And you know, for a little bit of context around sort of what the eligibility initiative represents here. What we're doing is we're working to help federal eligibility-based programs communicate their eligibility rules to state implementers and the public more efficiently and more accurately. Our model for doing that is to host program eligibility rules in an API, as you can imagine, that state and other local systems can connect to. So rather than each state having to build federal rules into their own systems individually. And what this means once we're in production will be reduced risk for eligibility system builds and modernization efforts, and also an easier path towards eligible people receiving the benefits that they need. That's really the kind of impact that we want to see. So let's get into a little bit of the background on this initiative. So next slide here. You can see the initial idea in this format here. This was submitted a little bit before 10x's sort of current format for pitches, so it's a little bit longer. But basically the idea was to investigate how to best use technology to improve public access to government benefits. And that can mean a lot of different things. This was originally submitted by Alex Pandel, one of the co-founders of 18F's human services portfolio. And a lot of the work on this project was undertaken also by Ed Mullen, who's also a co-founder on the eligibility, the human services portfolio, worked on the eligibility project up until his term out very recently. So we're carrying that work forward right now. Next slide, I can talk about sort of the way that the idea evolved a little bit. So in phase one, it's a really early exploration phase. You know, if you're familiar with the 10X program, you know that it's very short. The initial point here was to explore the benefits eligibility space, just sort of identify where potential value lie. And sure enough, the team found that exploring a rules web service for a non-Medicaid human services program would be really helpful. Without getting too deep into the weeds on this right now, there are pretty big differences between Medicaid programs and non-Medicaid programs, and this seemed like a right place to focus. Phase two included a prototype build of a rules as code API powered solution with WIC. That's a supplemental nutrition for women, infants, and children. Prototype rules as code, what that really means sort of is that there's a lot of systems that are part of larger, more complex benefit systems that are called eligibility rules engines. There's all sorts of really complicated logic happening to determine whether an applicant is eligible or not. And a rules as code approach to doing that sort of thing suggests that you can actually see the logic of the policy in the actual code itself. It's not really hidden behind a sort of elaborate user interface or a sort of WYSIWYG or kind of like rules creating engine. If you're familiar with the way that you do rules in Outlook for email, for example, you know, you can like add plain language logic there, but sometimes the sort of mechanics of how the rules are interacting can be a little bit confusing. So rules as code puts those rules like right there in visible, legible code. So that was the focus of phase two. Phase three, we expanded into a different prototyping effort. This was another rules as code API powered system with DSNAP. That was the disaster supplemental assistance program that was also within SNAP over at FNS. And this one we actually built and tested. It wasn't simply a built prototype. And so we partnered with them at the state level, regional level, and at the federal level to explore the possibilities for using this technique to help people in the wake of natural disasters get access to some of the benefits that they need. So next slide. So the current status, phase four, we were looking for new partners. We started with a search for new discovery partners, added somebody new to the team, Alex Sobel, a consulting engineer also at 18F. We have two partners right now. We've begun active work with one. So far, we created a proof of concept for another rules as code API with Head Start. We arranged for a second discovery partnership with a new partner to be named later. We haven't really gone public with this one yet. And we're experimenting with a new framework called OpenFisca as a possible accelerator. It's a rules as code engine that's also Python based, like the code that we're writing, and it's usable. It's broadly used in other parts of the world. In France and New Zealand, some other countries are using it to power very large systems. So what we're doing right now, next up is we're exploring the Head Start problem space. We're trying to find an appropriate use case for an API-powered application. We're coordinating the next partner kickoff, and we're also looking for new partners. Next slide. So that's my segue. If you would like to get in touch with us, we are still seeking partners for phase four here. We'd probably like another couple folks to work with to better understand some of the possible applications of this technique, and also just the sort of operations of benefits programs so that we can figure out whether this idea would even be applicable there. You can email the team. That's a Google group address there, so it goes to a message board that Alex and I can see. You can email me directly as the project lead. And then we also have the repo right here where you can see the work that we've been doing. And we've been updating every couple of weeks or so the wiki in that repo so you can stay in the loop. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you so much, Mike. Next up, we have Nikki Zeichner, who's going to talk about DevOps for privacy offices.
Hello. Let me just turn my video on. Hi, everyone. So just to start, In the course of its daily business, the federal government keeps thousands of databases with personally identifiable information about individuals. And it's really important that these offices have the tools to do that well. So this project, DevOps for Privacy Offices, is working to lay a foundation for privacy offices to increase their collaboration with engineers. And we're doing this because engineering can open up many new capabilities for privacy offices to better track data, more quickly respond to incidents, and more effectively engage with the public. And we're currently laying this foundation by structuring data found in PDF privacy compliance documents. But this was a bit of a pivot from where it began. So let's go to the next slide. So originally, the pitch idea for this project was focused on privacy in the context of design research. So for example, at 18F, we focus on human-centered design, and we speak to members of the public to understand how to build government services that will meet their needs. And these practices are becoming more common in government. So if government agencies are going to speak to the public more when they design their services, the question originally was, is there a way to help ensure that research participants' personal information is managed responsibly? And is there a more effective way to do this than by relying on the current compliance practices that we have in place already? So that was where this began. And then, the next slide. So once the research began in phase one, the team went beyond just looking at personally identifiable information that came in through design research. They zoomed out and looked at how privacy offices manage personally identifiable information more generally. And during that phase of research, the team learned that GSA's privacy office struggled because information about how IT systems manage PII sat inside of PDFs. And because the data wasn't structured, it was difficult to get a bird's eye view of the PII, the personally identifiable information in all of its systems. And this kept them from being more proactive in their work. So in phase one, the team proposed developing a dashboard that would create a bird's eye view for the GSA privacy office. So in phase two, we wanted to validate that assumption that such a tool would be a good idea. So we expanded our research to understand whether this problem existed for privacy offices elsewhere in the federal government. And when we learned that this was the case, that other offices were struggling with this as well, and that there was a broader need for this bird's eye view of PII, we began prototyping. So next slide. So here is just a little demo video of the prototype that an engineer on our team, Andrew Hyder, just spun up. Little side note is that he spun this up during a week when we were actually out for Thanksgiving, and he was onboarding, and he was like, let me try this, and suddenly it was amazing. So that was really cool. And then we refined it to get to the state where it is now. But if you can see this, we have GSA IT systems here, and they're searchable now by categories of personally identifiable information. So that was our initial attempt at trying to relieve these privacy officers from having to sift through PDFs all the time to find out what type of information they have to manage. And so we presented it to the GSA privacy office. They said, okay, this is going to help us in so many ways. We're really enthusiastic about working on this with you. And so we pitched for phase 3 funding to develop it further and to see where we would be able to scale it outside of GSA's office. So next slide. Great. So we just kicked off our phase 3 last week. And in this phase, we're building out the prototype so that it'll be a usable tool for GSA's privacy office. We're going to expand it to include all of the compliance documents that the privacy office deals with, not just a small sample that we used for the prototype. And we'll be building it for use cases that are the most important for them. And we'll also be exploring opportunities to expand this work with other privacy offices across the government. So that's it. Thanks so much. Also one note is that our, hopefully that team email address will be working by later today, but if you have some urgent need to get in touch, just email me directly to make sure that we get it. Thanks.
Cool. Thank you so much, Nikki. And next up to discuss Agile budgeting and oversight, we have Alicia Ruo.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Alicia. Today we're going to talk about Agile budgeting and oversight, and we've just begun phase 3. Next slide. Awesome. So just a little bit about where this project came from. Every year, the federal government provides billions of dollars of matching funds at the state and local level. A lot of this funding goes toward the maintenance and the modernization of IT systems. And this is really to implement important federal programs like Medicaid, child welfare, housing, unemployment insurance. But the unfortunate reality is so many of these projects and these legacy systems are failed projects. Remarkably, only 13% of major government software projects actually succeed. In part, this is because the folks who are responsible for making funding decisions and designing how this work happens really lack the technical knowledge needed to make those most effective budgeting decisions. So, this was a great sort of large challenge. And the hypothesis here was, if we want to save federal dollars and improve the outcomes on these projects, how do we do that, right? How do we shift how current funding decisions are made? Next slide. So initially in phase 1, it was really just an investigation of what a persuasion campaign could look like to improve state budgeting. Could we combine outreach and education and really improve how those state employees are making these decisions on custom software projects? The answer was yes, we could do something here. And phase 2 was really exploring what's the right teaching approach? Who's the right audience for this message? This led to the Agile Budgeting and Oversight Handbook. And if you go to the next slide, I can say a little bit more about that. So the handbook was released last August. It was written by 3 colleagues of mine at 18F, Robin Carnahan, Randy Hart, and Waldo Jakewith. This is an incredible document, which you can see at github.com/18f/technology budgeting. And what it seeks to do is to really kind of tie in everything that the team learned in phase 1 and 2. It's a 40-page guide for executives, budget specialists, legislators, and other decision makers who are doing that important work of funding or overseeing state government technology projects. It was a really big hit across this community, kind of surprisingly. It's been read by thousands of folks. It continues to be downloaded by hundreds of people each week, and we continue to hear from dozens of local, state, and federal agencies about it. So, if you haven't read this yet, I would really encourage you to take a look. You can download it as a PDF. You can read it on GitHub. And so moving into phase 3, we have really begun building off of this handbook. So what we're doing now is piloting a future TTS offering, really focused on Agile budgeting and oversight. So this will look like an educational curriculum tied to an in-person workshop and the development of a version of this handbook for federal agencies. So far, what we've done is kind of develop an initial proof of concept, again, tailored to those state budgeting processes for how they handle federal funds, and thinking through an ideal blueprint of who needs to be in the room, who can actually help shift these types of funding decisions. So far, we've identified 3 possible pilot states: Michigan, Colorado, and Texas, but we're definitely looking for more. So if you're interested, we'd love to hear from you. And on the next slide, you'll see our contact. But in the immediate term, what we're doing is lining up the first workshop to test this new model out in February, and then continuing to do that important market research and user testing. So gathering feedback from workshop participants, refining what we're delivering, and hopefully turning this into a sustainable offering for the future. So yeah, if you are interested, please reach out to my colleagues Waldo or Randy or myself, and I'd encourage you to take a look at that handbook. Thanks so much.
Cool. Thank you so much, Alicia. Next up, we've got Ben Peterson, who's going to talk about federal grant reporting. Ben?
Thanks, Will. Next slide. So before I start, I just want to acknowledge Reese Fury, who led this project up until a few months ago, for all their hard work and guidance. And they were actually the original pitch authors back in 2017. So the goal of this project is to increase federal grants programs' efficacy to those being served, as well as taxpayers' return on investment, by eliminating redundancies and generating a prototype that could be adapted across federal programs. Next. Next slide. Thanks. So in phase one, we validated this problem. Grant reporting is a time-consuming process that requires duplicative data entry into multiple systems that don't talk to each other. And then in phase two, our use case for prototyping was that a simple typo in a grantee's address can prompt a weeks-long clarification process, during which grantees don't get paid and can't do their work. Next slide. So in phase three, with more research conducted, we developed user stories for a 10x level impact for the people who receive grant funding and for the federal employees who manage and audit these grants. Next slide. So as part of this phase three research, we ran a hopes and fears exercise with 60+ federal employees representing over 10 grant giving agencies to uncover common concerns. And from that, improving cross-agency communication and data sharing helped inspire our team for our build. Next slide. Our first prototype was called SAFER, Single Audit Finding Resolution Tool. And it was a case management solution to create quick access to data across agencies with a grants dashboard and activity alerts. Next slide. So part of this was also a feature to invite people at different agencies and from the grant recipient themselves to collaborate. Next. And so this also included a comment section to improve communication in this normally siloed process. So we usability tested and demoed this prototype to the federal grants community and received positive reviews. However, while we were working on this, policy for grants shared services changed, and new tools now have to be approved through one federal team who works on a timeline of years. So, we're working on a smaller timeline, months to prove value and impact. So we had to pivot, and this work lives on as a proof of concept that we hope will inform a new way of managing grants and the later RFP to come. Next slide. So with the remainder of our time, we're addressing other pain points that were surfaced from the grants community during that hopes and fears exercise. Next. And so with Distiller, the process of identifying relevant grant audits can take multiple days each month for an agency or sub-agency to filter through, depending upon the size of the agency. And so with Distiller, we hope to reduce this to minutes. And the process we're using is to take different data sets of grants data of varying data quality and matching them together and extracting information out of audit PDFs using machine learning. And so this is a prototype we have in the works, currently hosted on cloud.gov. And we are prototyping this with several agencies and having conversations about ultimately where it will live. Next slide. And so you can follow along on our repos. The website is a work in progress. It's broken right now. And feel free to reach out if you want to learn more or want to get involved. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ben. Next up, I will introduce Tiffany Andrews, who's going to discuss machine learning as a service.
Thanks, Will. I'm excited to tell you about one of TTS's premier investments into this new technology as machine learning as a service. So next slide. The USAgov team actually has a website that can be seen as the government's front door. It allows members of the public to connect with vital, useful public information, and they make sure that it's accessible, timely, and people can access it from a variety of channels. One of the things that they do to ensure that information is accurate and accessible is they have surveys on the website. So in addition to surveys, you can also chat with their chatbot, or they have a call center. But however, through their surveys, they receive about 9,000 surveys on average every month, and 2,000 of those surveys are open text. So as you can imagine, a person who has to manually go through all 2,000 of those entries can become cumbersome. So they were looking at a way in which they can automate this data management process and then also leverage new technology. Next slide. So in phase one, there was a team that looked at ways in terms of really getting into the problem space of their data management process, in addition to looking at what are the current kind of industry tools that could possibly use in conjunction with their chatbots or with their surveys. One of the things that they found within looking at sentiment analysis tools that were already out in the market is that they created a lot of overkill. They didn't really provide as much value to the USAgov team, but and that the kind of the additional features were just not really needed in order to be able to filter out the information and get it out. They did see an opportunity for TTS to continue to invest. So in phase two, there was a team, thanks to Amos Stone, who's currently on login.gov, and Scott McAllister, who built out a prototype to triage all of the open text surveys that are coming in. So you can see it kind of similar to a spam filter, like your email. Things that, content that is deemed that you need or helpful or insightful, you find in your inbox, and everything that you don't doesn't get deleted or goes away, but it's in another separate spam folder. So that's what's happening to these public comments. And as you can see, they're non-regulated public comments. So within that way, we're still not losing any information, and there isn't any type of current policy or regulatory information that it has to do. Next slide. And then in phase three, we wanted to see how we can take it one step further. So we're looking at building out an MVP who we have adequately named Mel, and Mel can easily join your team, and I'll tell you how in just a bit. Mel allows you not only to pull in information if you're already using Qualtrics like the USA.gov team, but if not, don't worry about it. We can also have it be used through a Excel file. You upload this Excel file to Mel. Mel then triages your data, and from there, Mel will be able to let you know what the general topics that your data can be clustered into. The USA.gov team is spending a lot of time once they identified content that was helpful in terms of deeming which one is a bug, where people are kind of not being able to find the information that they need on a website. So we're currently actually building out and improving our topic model to be able to do that automatically for them. In addition, we've also started to explore with other use cases, and one being around employee feedback surveys. So we are internally inside of TTS, we have an employee feedback survey that goes out every January and looks at ways in which TTS can improve experiences for all of our colleagues. So that's the next use case. If you have a use case that you think we should try, let us know. And then also, we're going to be doing your Zero to Hero tactical playbook. So that allows you to know what government technologies are available to you and what open source technologies you can use in order to start your own machine learning project. Last slide. Thanks so much for allowing me to share this time. I look forward to connecting with you and playing with your data in the future.
Thanks so much, Tiffany. And next up, we've got Youssef Husseini, who's going to talk about combating bias in AI ML implementations.
Hi. My team, XD, is working on a project to combat bias in AI ML implementations. So this project is currently in phase 2, discovery phase. Next slide. So the original idea, proposed by one of our colleagues from 18F, focused on implementations of artificial intelligence and machine learning, which are known to suffer from systematic biases that can originate from many different sources. As originally conceived, the project focused on biases introduced by training machine learning algorithms on insufficiently diverse data sets imbalanced with respect to different populations, and training data sets that did not fully capture the complexity or range of scenarios that could be encountered in the wild. The project as proposed would have institutionalized corrective measures by critically reviewing existing projects and data sets used to build ML models and ML-based tools across government for biasing mismatches. While this proposal served as a valuable jumping off point for our work, the findings of our preliminary investigation led us to expand the scope of our work significantly. Next slide, please. So in the course of our first phase of research, we accomplished several goals. Specifically, in the course of our interviews with subject matter experts across agencies, statisticians, engineers, and researchers, we confirmed our starting hypothesis that there is a need for broadly useful tools and training materials to help people identify and mitigate bias, not only in data, but along the entire data science pipeline. It became very clear to us that in order to sufficiently address this problem, we need to account for biases across every step, from data collection and survey design, to data cleaning, to model building, to application output and interpretation. Also, given that our team is an innovation group that strives to build products in collaboration with research partners in academia and industry from a research perspective, also in the sense of doing translational work, in keeping with our organization's philosophy, we've identified several research partners who could help us validate and scope our vision for the project, and with whom we've started project research and development. Furthermore, in collaboration with some of our partners, we've devised a strategy for creating a set of research-based, user-friendly tools accessible to people with a variety of backgrounds, ranging from machine learning expert to non-ML software engineers to non-technical project managers and analysts. Next slide, please. So as far as the current project status, we're building on our phase 1 research, in the course of which, again, we encountered a widespread concern with AI/ML bias, confusion about how to identify such bias, confusion about how to use existing bias reduction tools on the market created by outside organizations, given the really specific constraints of government workflows and development environments, and a general dissatisfaction with the lack of practical tools for ML more generally. So in service of these expressed needs, we decided to build a centralized, user-friendly suite of tools with the specific needs of government employees in mind. So today, we're building towards a long-term goal of a comprehensive toolkit that helps users debias the output of ML products they've acquired either from outside vendors or to help them minimize bias that they might encounter in the process of developing and deploying their own models internally. We hope to build tools accessible by ML experts, general developers, and non-technical project managers who are doing resource planning and project scoping for ML-related work. If any of this work resonates with you, please note that we are actively looking for partners at any level of ML expertise, whether they work right now or not, to join us on this project as beta users and data and use case partners and general thought and ideation partners. Our deliverable will span the practical elements of like just having a toolkit. We'll also have an educational and training component, including a workshop to introduce government stakeholders to machine learning and data bias. So we're also looking for participants in that workshop to be held in February or March. Across future phases of the project, our long-term goals are to build tools for automatic bias detection and data auditing, creating tools that allow automated auditing of black box software that might be built outside of government for biases, and developing a recommendation engine that could offer detailed suggestions of model choices that would minimize controllable sources of bias in model output, and that would be appropriate for particular uses use cases and conditions that are commonly encountered in government settings. Next slide. Thanks. So in conclusion, again, we just want to encourage those of you hoping to use ML in your projects across government, anyone who's curious about data bias and algorithmic bias as they relate to machine learning, to get in touch with us if you're interested in any aspect of this project. From participation in the workshop, again, which is planned for the spring, to data and use case partnership. And we're interested in talking to people both within government and outside government. So feel free to visit our website, which should be listed on that slide, or send us an email at inquiries@xd.gov for more information. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shadi. Next up, we have Corey Nelson, who's going to talk about expanding the United States web design system.
Thank you. You can go to the next slide, please. So the original idea for this spoke about trust, really from the perception of the the public. So what evokes trust across government websites? When we think about that, it's generally terms of, your thoughts might immediately go to security, but it's a little more to security. You think about things of a visual nature and also things of a usability nature, right? So this is where this project kind of started. And then also the idea mentions the IDEA Act, which is, we now have titled the 21st Century Idea, which we also now call 21C. So if you were not aware, there is a test at the end, so please write that down. But mentioning that, it has to do with us leveraging the points of the law that have to do with consistency and usability. And so with the advent of a design system, the talk was about how do we leverage this to get that, basically. So let's go to the next slide. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the project got underway in phase one, just to speak with folks at HNF, which is where the design system was originally born from, and also some vendors with the tax court, CMS, and the now United States Web Design System product owners, as well as some other stakeholders within TTS. So we got underway to investigate how government agencies are experiencing or what they're experiencing to successfully adopt the design system, and whether that's good or bad. We wanted to understand what that was, and overall, what are the blockers, right? So our goal was to increase adoption. That's what the project was about. How do we get more agencies on board and using the design system, and what's keeping the ones that have not done so far? What's keeping them from doing that? So that's how we moved into this research. Next slide, please. So for phase two, during this research, we found sort of a split, right? So what are the main direct things that are impacting adoption? The first is what we call the product. So if you go to designsystem.digital.gov, obviously you can, the design system components and such is there, but there's also the website around that, right? The content of how you learn about the design system. That's what we consider the product. And then there's also the sort of the knowledge and guidance of how does this affect me as an agency stakeholder, as a manager? How does this affect my team? What does my team need to look like in order to successfully implement this? Who can I reach out to? These are all things that sort of had a play of how well or not these agencies were adopting the design system. So our process was interviews with several other agencies, including the Secret Service, FEMA, TSA, HUD, as mentioned below. And our results, we ended with, we did a bit of a pivot, as you saw in one of the other sets of slides. These things don't always go as planned, right? We have an idea from start to finish. This one actually kind of changed at the 11th hour with how we were going to recommend going forward. But we ended up closing this project with a recommendation document for the product team, for what to include in their product roadmap, because these were the things, again, related to the product that the implementers that we spoke to felt were missing. So this was a very tactical piece of help we can do there. And then with regard to knowledge and guidance, this project, this phase two project, was kicked off pretty closely with the team noted as innovation portfolio team, which we really are the caretakers and sort of the owners for the design system. And they're already working on a maturity model to be able to help these agencies understand where they are in the implementation process and be able to do so and get on board in an incremental manner. So we worked with them on both those sides of the product and the knowledge and guidance, and that's how we're closing phase two. So it didn't come to, yes, we're going to move on to phase three and do this, although we are going to phase three with another part of the design system. It's not part of this discussion, but it's just one of those points where 10X, we have to be flexible with how these things can end up at the end, but we still did some work that we think is going to be a very useful and tactical piece of a document for the design system team to use. Next slide. And this is how you can reach us. And these websites are some of the useful things that we've helped the innovation portfolio team produce. And that stuff is out there for you to read, and feel free to reach out to us for any further questions. That's it.
Cool. Thank you very much, Corey. And next up, we have, last but certainly not least, Eleni Gesh-Karamanlidis is going to talk about the 10x site scanning project.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. Yes, my name is Eleni. I'm the lead for this phase 3. Can we move to the next slide? Next slide. There we go. So site scanning. So what is this project about? So initially this project was pitched with this idea that what was happening was if you wanted to look basically under the hood of a federal website to see what best practices were in place regarding anything around website design or mobile friendliness, you had to do that manually. And so this was an idea to develop some sort of automated system to do that so that you reduce a lot of the legwork associated and you also get more on-demand type analysis that you can use. Next slide. So in the phase 1 of this project, the big question was, is this even a good idea? Could this have the kind of larger scale impact and demand that would warrant more investigation? And the answer was, yeah, this seems like a good and achievable idea. So then in phase 2, the team looked at, well, let's see who the different stakeholders are. Let's identify some key stakeholders that we could start building something for. And then in that phase, the major accomplishment was to build out a very basic MVP for them. And if you see in the next slide, we have got a number of things going on currently. And so we have identified 5 different stakeholders that we are really focusing on designing for. You can see those in the top right. You can also see in the top left some examples of what this scan even looks like. We are doing a very bare bones approach right now. Up until this point, we have worked on getting something that gives the data it needs. And now what we're doing, and this is where the fun part comes in, is we are taking all of that skeleton and we are trying to create this fully featured, customizable user interface that folks can go and from a large data set very quickly and easily pull the different data that they need to develop their customized analysis and reporting. And that will be built on API functionality. Another thing we're trying to work on right now is we're trying to refine the existing scans we have. So for example, one scan that we have is, say that you want to check that there's a particular site in a federal domain that is up and running. So we have a scan that will very quickly and easily do that so that someone, say a federal webmaster, can go through and look at the scan results and very quickly look across all domains and see, yes, these particular ones are being checked and they are up and running. So that's an example of the kind of thing you can do. And what we want to do is we want to further refine those, making them even more accurate, having more data points that come in with those scans. And then we also want to expand the different types of scans, the number of scans that can be used. And we want to expand the number of stakeholders that we are serving. So right now we've got those 5 key stakeholders on the right. This is potentially where some of you come in if you are listening and you think that you are a group that could be served by this tool. We would love to hear from you. I have my contact information in a moment. The other thing we're working on is right now we scan at a top level domain, but we also want to scratch the surface a little deeper and go that one level below and start looking at subdomains. So our work right now over the next 2 months of development is to try to scan a little deeper in that layer. And then finally, our big goal for ourselves by the end of April is that we want to have one of our stakeholders using this data in their production. What we mean by that is that this scan data is part of their daily workflow that they are using to really help themselves accomplish their mission more accurately and faster. Next slide. So here's how you can reach out to me. I would love to hear from you. Right now, the folks that are just interested in our project, just following along in our progress, we've got folks within GSA as well as some cross-cutting federal groups. We would love to be connected to more folks that are in different agencies, as well as more folks in TTS, GSA, and across the government. And if you think that you might want to help us develop this, we would also love to hear you. If you want to check out what this thing even looks like, please take a look at the website and take a look at our public repo. We are actually in the process of revamping this to be even more public friendly. So we're putting lots of really interesting information there that you can check out the project with. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Eleni. This brings us to the close of our lightning talks. I want to implore our attendees, if you would like to reach out to our project teams with questions, please do so. If your work aligns with what they're doing and you think you might be able to partner with them, certainly reach out. I want to give a huge thank you to all of our presenters today. I know it's not always easy to get in front of folks and just sort of talk about the work that you're doing, but I thank you for doing that. And a final reminder that the submission deadline for the next round of Phase 1 funding projects is this Thursday night. So go to 10x.gsa.gov, submit your ideas before 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time. And lastly, huge thank you to the DigitalGov team. We've got Gabby, the Alexes, Jeremy, everyone else involved, and Dan Radamus, the man with the plan. Thank you all very, very much.